Paisley Scott walked into Anderson's gun store wearing a simple sundress and sandals, looking like a college student shopping for her first self-defense class. The three men behind the counter started laughing before she even spoke. "Let me guess, sweetheart," the store owner chuckled. "You want something pink and easy to handle?" What they didn't know was that Paisley Scott was the most feared sniper in SEAL history, with 187 confirmed eliminations across 4 continents. And the SEAL commander who was about to walk through that door had been searching for her for 3 years. Have you ever been so completely underestimated that people made assumptions about your capabilities before you even opened your mouth? Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone dismisses as harmless. Anderson's gun store sat on the outskirts of Millfield, Virginia, a small town where everybody knew everybody's business and strangers were noticed immediately. The store catered primarily to local hunters, weekend sport shooters, and the occasional law enforcement officer looking for personal equipment. Paisley Marie Scott had chosen her outfit carefully that Tuesday afternoon in September. What she actually was would have terrified every person in that gun store if they'd known the truth. Master Chief Petty Officer Paisley Scott, call sign Ghost 6, had spent 8 years as the most lethal sniper in the history of U.S. Navy SEAL operations. Her official record, classified at the highest levels of military intelligence, showed 187 confirmed eliminations across operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and locations that didn't appear on any public map. 2 years ago, everything had changed. During a classified operation in Eastern Europe, Paisley's team had been betrayed by intelligence leaks that resulted in an ambush that killed 4 SEAL operatives. Rather than risk further compromise of SEAL operations, Paisley had been offered a choice: continue active duty, knowing every mission could be a trap, or accept an honorable discharge and disappear into civilian life under a new identity. She'd chosen to disappear. For 2 years, Master Chief Paisley Scott had been officially dead, killed during a classified operation that never made it into public records. Only 3 people in the entire military knew that she'd actually been relocated to Millfield, Virginia, with a complete civilian identity as an elementary school art teacher. It was the most boring, safe, normal life she'd ever lived, and she was slowly going insane from the lack of purpose. That's why she'd decided to buy a hunting rifle. Not for actual hunting, but because she needed to feel the weight of a precision weapon in her hands again. "Well, hello there, sweetheart," said Bobby Anderson, the store owner, as Paisley approached the counter. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with graying hair and the kind of smile that made women instinctively check their exits. "What can we do for a pretty little thing like you today?" "I'd like to look at hunting rifles," Paisley said politely, maintaining the soft-spoken persona she'd developed for her civilian identity. "I'm planning to try deer hunting this season." "Deer hunting?" Anderson's assistant, a young man named Jake, started chuckling. "Ma'am, have you ever fired a rifle before?" "Not really," Paisley lied smoothly. "My boyfriend thinks I should learn, but I don't know much about guns." Anderson and Jake exchanged knowing looks while the third employee, an older man named Pete, shook his head with amusement. "Well, honey," Anderson said with exaggerated patience, "hunting rifles aren't really toys. They're serious weapons that require a lot of strength and experience to handle safely." Anderson walked over to a display case containing small caliber rifles. "Now, for someone like you, I'd recommend starting with something simple. Maybe a .22 caliber rifle that won't kick too hard and won't be too heavy for you to carry." He pulled out a pink-colored rifle that looked like it had been designed for a child's toy collection. "This little beauty here is perfect for ladies. It's lightweight, comes in a nice color, and has a recoil that won't knock you over." Paisley stared at the rifle with the expression of someone trying very hard to maintain politeness. In her military career, she'd used weapon systems that required security clearances to even look at. And this man was trying to sell her a pink .22 caliber rifle because he thought she was too delicate for anything more serious. "Actually," Paisley said carefully, "I was hoping to look at something with a little more range. Maybe something in .308 caliber? The three men burst into laughter as if she'd just suggested buying a rocket launcher. "Oh, sweetheart," Pete chimed in. "A .308 would break your shoulder. Those are serious hunting rifles for serious hunters. You'd end up on your back after the first shot." Jake nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, those rifles weigh like 8 pounds. You'd probably have trouble even lifting one." Anderson leaned on the counter with the air of someone about to deliver educational wisdom. "Listen, honey, I've been selling guns for 23 years, and I can tell you that ladies like yourself always think they want the big rifles until they actually try to shoot one." Paisley nodded as if she was absorbing this valuable advice, while internally calculating how many different ways she could disable all three men using nothing but the items currently on the counter. "Could I at least look at one of the .308 rifles?" she asked. "Just to see what they're like?" Anderson sighed with the patience of someone dealing with a persistent child. "Sure, honey, but don't say I didn't warn you." He walked over to a locked display case and removed a Remington 700 in .308 caliber, a rifle that Paisley recognized as essentially identical to the weapon system she'd used for her record-setting long-range elimination in Afghanistan. "Here you go," Anderson said, placing the rifle on the counter with exaggerated care. "This baby weighs about 8.5 pounds and has enough power to drop a bull elk at 300 yards. Feel free to hold it, but be careful. It's a lot heavier than it looks." Paisley reached for the rifle with the tentative movements of someone who'd never handled a serious weapon. The moment her hands touched the stock and barrel, muscle memory from thousands of hours of training took over. Her grip automatically adjusted to the optimal position for stability and control. Her stance shifted imperceptibly to accommodate the weapon's weight distribution. Her breathing pattern changed to the slow, controlled rhythm that snipers used for precision shooting. For about 2 seconds, she was Master Chief Paisley Scott again. Then she caught herself and resumed the awkward handling that Anderson expected. "Oh my," she said, pretending to struggle with the rifle's weight. "It is heavy. And the scope looks so complicated." "That's a Leupold 3 to 9 times scope," Jake explained condescendingly. "The numbers control magnification, but honestly, you'd never need more than 3 times magnification for the kind of hunting a beginner should be doing." Paisley nodded as if this was fascinating new information, while thinking about the 25 times magnification scope she'd used for her longest range elimination. "The important thing to remember," Pete added, "is that real hunting requires a lot more than just pointing and shooting. You need to understand ballistics, wind compensation, range estimation, technical stuff that takes years to learn." "Years," Anderson agreed, "and that's if you have natural talent, which, no offense, most ladies just don't have for long-range shooting." Paisley was beginning to understand why civilian women had such difficulty being taken seriously in traditionally male activities. The casual dismissal based purely on gender was both infuriating and enlightening. "So you really think I should stick with the .22?" she asked. "Absolutely," Anderson said with conviction. "Start with something you can handle, learn the basics, and maybe in a few years you'll be ready for a real hunting rifle." Paisley was about to respond when the bell above the store's front door chimed. She glanced toward the entrance and saw a man in civilian clothes who immediately triggered every threat assessment protocol she'd learned in special operations. The newcomer was approximately 35 years old, 6 feet tall, with the kind of physical conditioning that suggested serious military training. His casual clothes couldn't hide the tactical awareness in his movements or the way his eyes automatically scanned the store for potential threats. More importantly, he was staring directly at Paisley with an expression of complete disbelief. Commander James Mitchell had spent 3 years searching for Ghost 6. Not officially, of course. According to every military database, Master Chief Paisley Scott was dead, killed during a classified operation. But Mitchell had been there during the ambush in Eastern Europe. He'd seen the aftermath of the betrayed mission, and he'd never believed that Paisley Scott was actually dead. As the commanding officer of SEAL Team 7, Mitchell had worked with Ghost 6 on 4 different operations. He'd witnessed her capabilities firsthand and understood that she was possibly the most valuable tactical asset in the entire U.S. military. For 3 years, Mitchell had used his security clearance and intelligence contacts to search for any trace of Paisley Scott. The search had become an obsession that had cost him 2 relationships and nearly derailed his military career. But he'd never been able to accept that the most effective sniper in SEAL history was simply gone. Now he was staring at her across a small-town gun store, wearing a sundress and pretending to be a civilian who didn't know how to hold a rifle. "Excuse me," Mitchell said quietly, addressing Anderson while keeping his eyes on Paisley. "I couldn't help but notice the lady is looking at hunting rifles." Anderson smiled, apparently relieved to have a male customer who would understand the situation. "Yeah, trying to talk her out of buying something that'll knock her flat on her back. Ladies always want the big rifles until they actually have to shoot them." Mitchell's expression didn't change, but Paisley noticed the slight tightening around his eyes that indicated controlled anger. "Is that right?" Mitchell said carefully. "What kind of rifle is she interested in?" "She was asking about .308 caliber, Jake chimed in. "Can you believe it? I told her she should stick with a .22 until she learns the basics." Mitchell looked directly at Paisley, and she saw recognition burning in his eyes. He knew exactly who she was, and he was giving her the opportunity to maintain her cover or reveal herself. "Ma'am," Mitchell said with careful respect, "have you had any experience with long-range shooting?" This was the moment that would determine whether 2 years of careful cover would continue or end forever. Paisley could maintain her role as the confused civilian, or she could trust that Mitchell's presence meant something had changed. She made her decision. "Some," Paisley said quietly, and her voice carried a different quality than the soft-spoken art teacher persona she'd been maintaining. Mitchell nodded slowly. "What's the longest shot you've ever made?" The 3 store employees were watching this exchange with growing confusion. Anderson sensed that something had changed in the conversation's dynamic. Paisley looked Mitchell directly in the eyes. 3,214 meters. The silence that followed lasted exactly 7 seconds. Mitchell's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, recognition, awe, and finally something approaching reverence. He'd known who she was, but hearing her casually mention the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history made the reality hit him like a physical blow. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, barely audible. Anderson, Jake, and Pete were staring at both of them with complete confusion. The number Paisley had mentioned meant nothing to them, but Mitchell's reaction suggested it was significant. "I'm sorry," Anderson said slowly, "but what exactly is going on here?" Mitchell never took his eyes off Paisley. "Sir, you've been trying to sell hunting rifles to someone who holds the world record for long-range precision shooting." "World record?" Pete repeated. Mitchell's voice carried the respect typically reserved for military legends. "Ma'am, is it true that you made the Kamdesh shot?" Paisley nodded once. "And the Baghdad eliminations?" Another nod. Mitchell stepped back and, to the complete astonishment of everyone in the store, came to attention and rendered a crisp military salute. "Master Chief," he said with a voice that carried years of professional respect, "it's an honor." Anderson, Jake, and Pete were staring at this scene as if reality had suddenly shifted. The pretty young woman in the sundress was being saluted by a man who clearly had serious military credentials. "I don't understand," Anderson said weakly. "She's just a school teacher." Mitchell slowly lowered his salute. "Sir, you've been talking to Master Chief Paisley Scott, call sign Ghost 6. She's the most lethal sniper in the history of U.S. Special Operations." Jake's mouth fell open. "But she wanted to buy a pink .22. "No," Mitchell said patiently. "She wanted to look at .308 hunting rifles. You decided she wasn't capable of handling them." Pete was staring at Paisley as if seeing her for the first time. "You're military?" "Was," Paisley said simply. "I've been retired for 2 years." Anderson's face was cycling through embarrassment, disbelief, and growing horror as he realized how badly he'd misjudged the situation. "But you said you'd never fired a rifle before." "I said not really," Paisley corrected gently, "which is technically true. I've never fired a civilian hunting rifle for recreational purposes." Mitchell was studying Paisley's civilian appearance with professional interest. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what brings you to a gun store in Virginia?" Paisley considered how much to reveal. "I wanted to see if I could find a rifle similar to what I used during active duty, just for target practice. It's been 2 years since I've done any precision shooting." Mitchell nodded, understanding. "Are you finding anything suitable?" Paisley glanced at the Remington 700 still sitting on the counter. "Actually, that .308 is almost identical to my primary weapon system. With some modifications, it would be adequate." Anderson finally found his voice. You really hold a world record for sniper shooting?" "Several records," Mitchell answered for her, "including longest confirmed elimination, most eliminations in a single engagement, and most successful deep cover operations completed." Jake was staring at Paisley with a mixture of awe and terror. "How many?" 187 confirmed eliminations across 4 continents, Mitchell said when Paisley remained silent, "plus classified operations that can't be discussed." Pete sat down heavily on a stool behind the counter. "And we were trying to sell her a pink .22. "Nothing wrong with a 22, Paisley said kindly. "They're excellent training rifles." "But I was hoping for something with a little more range." Anderson was looking at the rifle display with new understanding. "Ma'am, we have some custom precision rifles in the back, military-grade equipment that I don't usually show to civilian customers." "The Remington will work fine with proper modifications," Paisley said. Mitchell stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, how are you doing?" "With civilian life?" Paisley considered the question carefully. "It's an adjustment. Quiet, safe, sometimes too quiet." Mitchell nodded with understanding. "If you ever want to talk to someone who understands, I'm stationed about an hour north of here. SEAL Team 7. "I know who you are, Commander Mitchell," Paisley said with a slight smile. "Your reputation precedes you." Mitchell looked surprised. "You know my work?" "Operation Neptune's Fury, Syria. Very clean. And the Tripoli extraction, textbook performance." Mitchell's expression shifted to professional pride. "Thank you, ma'am. That means a lot coming from you." Anderson interrupted their conversation. "Ma'am, about the rifle. What kind of modifications would you need?" Paisley approached the Remington with movements that were suddenly precise and professional. She examined the trigger group, tested the bolt action, and sighted down the barrel with fluid expertise. "The trigger needs adjustment for a cleaner break. Probably down to about 2 pounds. The stock could use modifications for better cheek weld. And this scope needs upgrading. I'd prefer something with higher magnification and better glass quality." Mitchell was watching her weapon inspection with professional interest. "What kind of scope are you thinking?" "Nightforce or Schmidt and Bender. Variable power, probably 5 to 25 times magnification." Anderson was taking notes as if receiving an education in precision rifles. "We can order whatever you need. Military-grade optics, custom trigger work, stock modifications." Jake, who had been silent, finally spoke up. "Ma'am, I'm really sorry about earlier. We didn't know." "You couldn't have known," Paisley said gently. "I was playing a role and you responded to what you saw." "No harm done." Pete was still staring at her with amazement. 187 confirmed eliminations. That's incredible. "It was my job," Paisley said simply. Mitchell understood she was uncomfortable with attention to her military record. "Ma'am, would you be interested in some recreational shooting? I know a private range about 20 minutes from here." For 2 years, she'd been completely isolated from anyone who understood her background. The opportunity to shoot with someone who appreciated precision marksmanship was tempting. "That sounds enjoyable," she said. Mitchell pulled out a business card and wrote his personal number on the back. "Call me when your rifle is ready. I'd be honored to spot for you." Anderson was calculating modification costs. "Ma'am, with custom trigger work, stock modifications, and a high-end scope, we're looking at about $3,000 total." "That's fine," Paisley said without hesitation. Jake was still processing the revelation. "Ma'am, when you made that record shot, 3,000 meters, what were the conditions like?" Paisley's expression grew distant. "Hostile territory in Afghanistan. Target was an enemy commander coordinating attacks on a coalition base. Range was 3,214 meters across a valley with variable winds. Mitchell leaned forward with professional interest. What was the setup time? 17 hours. I had to infiltrate to a position with clear line of sight, then wait for weather conditions to stabilize. 17 hours in enemy territory? Pete asked. Undetected, Paisley confirmed. The shot had to be perfect because there wouldn't be a second opportunity. Anderson was listening with growing respect. How do you calculate a shot at that distance? Multiple factors, Paisley explained patiently. Wind speed and direction at various altitudes, temperature and humidity effects on trajectory, Earth's rotation. At that distance, the Coriolis effect becomes significant. Target movement patterns and timing. Mitchell nodded with understanding. And you only get one shot. One shot, Paisley agreed. Miss and the target either escapes or your position is compromised. Jake was staring at her with something approaching worship. And you never missed? I missed plenty during training, Paisley said with a slight smile. But during actual operations, when lives depend on your accuracy, missing isn't an option. The store fell silent as everyone processed the weight of that responsibility. Anderson cleared his throat. Ma'am, about that rifle. When would you like to pick it up? How long for the modifications? Give me 2 weeks to do it right. Custom trigger work takes time. Paisley nodded. 2 weeks is fine. As they prepared the paperwork, Anderson made a decision that would change how his store operated forever. Ma'am, before you go, I wanted you to know that meeting you has changed how we approach customers. We're not going to make assumptions about people's capabilities based on their appearance anymore. Paisley smiled. That's probably wise. You never know who might walk through your door. Exactly, Anderson said. Everyone deserves respect until they prove they don't. 2 weeks later, Paisley returned to pick up her modified rifle. Anderson had spent hours on the trigger work, achieving a crisp 2-pound break. The stock had been adjusted for optimal fit, and the Night Force scope had been mounted with precision. When Paisley tested the rifle's feel and balance, Anderson could see immediate approval in her assessment. This is excellent work, she said, shouldering the rifle and checking scope alignment. Much better than I expected. Anderson beamed with pride. Ma'am, it's been an honor working on a rifle for someone with your background. As Paisley prepared to leave, Anderson had a new sign made for the store. We serve all customers with respect, regardless of appearance or background. You never know who might be a hero. The sign became famous in the local community, though most people never learned the story behind it. Paisley Scott continued teaching art to elementary school children, living quietly in her small house. But once a week, she drove to the private shooting range where Commander Mitchell waited with professional ammunition and tactical scenarios that reminded her what it felt like to be the most dangerous person in the world. The rifle that Anderson had modified performed flawlessly, allowing Paisley to maintain the skills that had made her a legend, even if that legend was supposed to be dead. The first time Paisley used her modified rifle at the private range with Commander Mitchell, she fired 20 rounds at targets placed at distances from 100 to 1,200 meters. Every single shot found its mark with precision that left Mitchell speechless. The rifle performed exactly as she'd hoped, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt completely herself again. It's like riding a bicycle, she told Mitchell as they packed up the equipment, except the bicycle can eliminate targets at impossible distances. Mitchell had brought several other SEAL operators to witness what he described as a living legend in action. They'd all heard stories about Ghost 6, but seeing Paisley Scott demonstrate her capabilities in person was something none of them would ever forget. Ma'am, said Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, one of Mitchell's most experienced snipers, that 1,200-meter shot into a 10-inch target. I've never seen anything like it. The wind was gusting at 15 miles per hour. Paisley smiled as she cleaned her rifle with the methodical precision that had become second nature. Wind is just another variable to calculate. The key is patience and understanding that every shot tells you something about the next one. Over the following months, word spread quietly through SEAL communities that Ghost 6 was alive and occasionally available for advanced training sessions. Paisley found herself teaching small groups of elite snipers techniques that weren't found in any manual, sharing insights gained through 8 years of operations that had pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. The real secret, she would tell her students, isn't just making the shot. It's becoming invisible long enough to get into position, patient enough to wait for the perfect moment, and precise enough to never need a second chance. Anderson's gun store became an unlikely pilgrimage site for military personnel who'd heard the story of the legendary sniper who'd been underestimated by civilian gun dealers. Anderson kept the details of Paisley's identity confidential, but he never forgot the lesson she'd taught him about judging people based on appearances. Jake eventually joined the military himself, inspired by meeting someone who'd dedicated her life to protecting others. Before leaving for basic training, he stopped by Paisley's classroom to thank her for changing his perspective about what real strength looked like. "You taught me that heroes don't always look like what we expect," he told her as third graders worked on art projects around them. "Sometimes they're teaching kids how to paint flowers." Pete began volunteering at a local veterans organization, working with former military personnel who were struggling with civilian transition. His experience meeting Paisley had taught him that many veterans carried invisible burdens and capabilities that civilian society didn't understand or appreciate. The most significant change came 6 months later, when Paisley received an encrypted message through channels she thought had been permanently closed. The intelligence leak that had forced her into hiding had finally been identified and eliminated. The foreign intelligence network that had targeted her operations had been dismantled through a joint operation involving agencies from 3 countries. Commander Mitchell delivered the news personally during one of their weekly shooting sessions. "You're officially alive again," he told her as they watched sunset paint the mountains orange and gold. "Full reinstatement with back pay, promotion to senior chief, and assignment to any unit you choose." Paisley considered the offer while adjusting her rifle's scope for evening light conditions. "What about my cover identity here?" "Paisley Scott, the art teacher, can remain in Millfield if that's what you want. But Master Chief Paisley Scott can also return to active duty. The choice is entirely yours." For the first time since her forced retirement, Paisley had options that didn't involve hiding from her past or abandoning her identity. She made her decision the way she'd made every important choice in her military career, by considering where she could do the most good for the most people. "I want to do both," she told Mitchell. "Continue teaching during the school year, but return to active duty for specialized training and operations during summers. The kids need consistency, but the military needs institutional knowledge that I've spent years developing." Mitchell smiled with admiration for her solution. "I think we can arrange that. Go 6 is a part-time consultant and full-time elementary school teacher. The arrangement proved perfect for everyone involved. Paisley's students never learned that their art teacher spent summer vacations training the most elite snipers in the world, and military personnel never stopped being amazed that someone capable of eliminating targets at impossible distances could also teach third graders how to paint watercolor butterflies. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in the most ordinary places, and sometimes the person you underestimate based on a sundress and sandals is actually the most lethal sniper in military history, patiently waiting for someone to recognize that appearances can be the most dangerous deception of all. But perhaps most importantly, sometimes the person who seems to have disappeared from one life is actually building a new one that incorporates everything they've learned about strength, patience, and the importance of protecting others, whether those others are fellow warriors or children learning to see the world through artistic eyes. Have you ever discovered that someone you completely misjudged was actually far more capable than you ever imagined? Sometimes the quiet person in the corner has skills that could redefine what you think is possible, and sometimes the woman in the sundress is a ghost who decided to become visible just long enough to remind everyone that legends never really disappear. They just choose when to reveal themselves. The story of Paisley Scott became a reminder that heroes often hide in plain sight, serving others in ways that society might not recognize as heroic. Teaching children and eliminating threats both require precision, patience, and dedication to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon is the one nobody sees coming. And sometimes the most powerful lesson is learning that strength comes in forms that defy every assumption we make about who deserves our respect. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this one.